What? Bang!
Whoa! Wrestling podcast. Just when they think they got the answers, I change the question.
Rep screwed rep.
Yeah!
Woo!
Who are you to doubt El Dan? Because this guy's a serious professional.
Can he do it? Unbelievable!
I'm too hot to handle and too cold to hold. And I am the Macho King, you savage.
Shut your mouth, you thong-wearing fatty! I said WWE stands for!
It's me, Austin! I will never retire!
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, welcome to the show where we don't sing it, we bring it. Help us out and click subscribe to show your support. Are you sick and tired of dropping $60 to $100 for the latest and greatest wrestling video game? Stop immediately. Go to Wrestler Unstoppable, available exclusively through Facebook. Create a wrestler, sign contracts, get into storylines, headline pay-per-views, even build your own corporation, all included in Wrestler Unstoppable, available now to all Facebook users, totally free. If you want to become a member of the Pro Wrestling Podcast family, you want your name in the shout-outs like my good buddy John down in Texas. John, got to link up to record an episode one of these days. I hope you're tuning in right now. Go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/ProWrestlingPodcast. Sign up today. We have loyalty rewards. $15 a month contributors, you get to co-host an episode with myself live. $7.50 a month contributors will enter your name into a drawing to also host a live episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. If you've got questions, comments, anything you would like us to get to in a future episode, give us a shout over at the Pro Wrestling Sound Off line, 267-642-1160, where we can go through anything you'd like us to talk about on a future show. Tonight, jumping into several things. It's been a hot minute since we've put up an episode. Crown Jewel on the horizon. Lots of things coming with that. Coming out of Bad Blood, where we saw an insane pay-per-view. I do have some complaints about Bad Blood. I gotta be honest. I cannot understand why the hottest angle of the entire year, which has been Drew and Punk, didn't headline this show. I get the Return of the Rock, I really do, but the Return of the Rock literally took less than 60 seconds. There is no reason that you couldn't have gotten just as big of an impact from him at the onset of the show as at the end of the show. Now, I understand that The Rock is probably going to be one of the main events at Mania. There's conversation about Rock and Cody for the championship at Mania, conversation about Rock and Roman at Mania, and some other opportunities and possibilities. But the reality is, I think you did a disservice to Punk and Drew for everything they did this year. They have literally put together one of the greatest feuds in recent memory without even being in the ring for the first 5-6 months of the feud. And then once they got into the ring, the physicality was off the chain. It did not stop here at Bad Blood with all the brutality, the 16 stitches in McIntyre's head. I mean, it really was a physical match. That being said, I have to address the conversation around Raw where CM Punk cut his promo talking about how beat up he was and whatnot, and people wondering if he's genuinely injured. And let's be honest, in the past several years, Punk has had several injuries, so there was always a possibility that could happen. However, this is a work for a very sound reason. One of CM Punk's biggest criticisms of WWE in the several years prior to him returning to the company was their dealings with Saudi Arabia, especially the Crown Jewel events and whatnot. He had some very profanity-laden comments for The Miz previously and things like that. It is not something he wants to participate with. He does not believe in some of the situations overseas and does not want to be a part of those shows. So this promo, making it seem as though he's injured in some way, shape, or form, writes him off of television and allows him to not have to appear until after Crown Jewel. Give him some time off, heal up, because I'm sure he is sore as all get up, but gives him some time to heal, and let's take him off television until after that show, so there's no storyline reason why one of the biggest stars in the company, who just ended one of the best feuds of the year, isn't on the show. I actually like the write-off. I also enjoyed the tease for Punk and Rollins as Rollins interrupted Punk at the end of his promo on Raw. I think that's great because I think that's going to eventually set up Punk versus Rollins at Mania, which is what I would absolutely do. I think that's what they were going to do last year. So I'm looking forward to that. But I gotta say, I did not enjoy the interruption by Jey Uso, the exchange with he and Seth Rollins. Not that I don't want to see those two wrestle, not that I don't like the forward telling of possibly having a storyline down the road between those two, because that's a match that I think would be very intriguing. But it's too much. We shortened Raw from 3 to 2 hours this week for the first time in a very long time, and it seems like WWE forgot how to run a 2-hour show and tried to cram every little nook and cranny into this show that they possibly could, whether it's the people coming out and interrupting each other, or putting 9 million ladies into one match just to try to get people on the show. When you cut off an hour's worth of the time you typically use, it does make booking a little more difficult, more challenging. And it also means that if you have angles, you really need to do your due diligence to follow up on those angles. And I hate to say this, but you have so many hours of programming in a week, you need to make sure that you budget the time, or you don't start the storylines to begin with if you're not going to follow up with them. Now, I do love that the PLEs recently have all been 5 matches or so we get a lot higher quality main event PLE level matches on Raw and SmackDown. I do like that, but I do think that there definitely felt like there was something missing from Monday night, that there could have been more, and obviously it's the 3rd hour, and it's the way they structured this show, but what are you going to do? At the end of the day, I think they did a relatively decent job of getting things put together. Coming out of Bad Blood, conversation about Roman Reigns' return being, to the ring being huge. I did see over on Wrestling Inc. there was an interesting story up where they were talking about an article by Wrestling Purists, another website where they spoke, and the quote that's on there says that Roman has supreme power. His power is so strong he gets to book other people on SmackDown. It's a total shoot. I asked 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago who's winning the tag team ladder match between the Bloodline, Street Profits, and DIY, and the person who spoke said, that's up to Roman. So who won exactly? And it really makes you realize just what his role is in WWE right now. He's not just a wrestler. He has tons of influence. His family is inundated throughout multiple storylines in the company at the same time. I find it fascinating that he is so well connected. I'll be curious to see how that plays out over the next several weeks, especially with something like Crown Jewel coming. I do have to say, I know a lot of people think that the belt that was brought out, Triple H introducing the Crown Jewel Championships, was such a horrible looking belt. I admit, I don't really like it myself. I do think it's almost like a knockoff of AEW's International / Continental / whatever they call it now, Championship. I get that. I see the same thing. I think that's something that is a bit of an issue, but otherwise, I think it's interesting to add a layer to the show. The only thing I don't like is, what would you have done if it was still Cody and Seth Rollins as champions, or Damian Priest, or whatever? I understand they booked it so it could be this way, so we get Cody and Gunther, but that's a match that should be on Mania at some point. Right now, you have them on opposing brands. I guess maybe they're looking ahead to the next couple Manias and mapping things out so far ahead that they don't see an opportunity to put Gunther and Cody together at Mania. I think that's insane because the quality of the baby faces and heels right now is so deep and for the years to come that I think that shouldn't be that difficult to do. But I'm glad we're going to get the match. I just wish it wasn't for this ugly championship. And if you're going to bring in a new championship, put it on somebody who is not the world champion. Create something that is for Saudi Arabia, because we're going to be doing 2 or 3 shows a year in Saudi. To create something it's defended at every Saudi show. Don't do this once a year thing, because that's silly to me. It's almost a throwback to Braun Strowman winning that greatest Royal Rumble, and you got that big green belt, which actually, of all the WWE belts that had that similar design, that one actually might have been the most attractive looking belt I've seen. It's got to be that or the UK championships, but I really would have preferred something that it didn't have to tie in the world champions. I feel like those world champion level matches are Mania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble. That's where you should showcase those high quality matches. Let's look at it this way. Those 2 people are supposed to be your best wrestlers on your roster. So if that's not the case, then who is? And if they are, why would you put your 2 best against each other at a Saudi show? I don't see how that works. I mean, maybe that's part of how they're getting more money out of Saudi Arabia, but Not a big fan. What I know, I've already heard some people tell me that they disagree with me. I know I'm in the minority. I'm actually thrilled with the involvement of Bill Goldberg. One, he's not beating anybody in 2024, but I do think that Triple H is showing us something here. He is willing to look past any previous issue. Goldberg only in March talking about how Triple H ended his winning streak record and gave it to Asuka, and how he gives everybody the spear to bury his move and whatnot. That was only 6-8 months ago. And he's already and now here he is walking out at Crown Jewel, getting involved, telling Gunther he's next. I think what we could easily see is if you plan out looking ahead, it's not going to be a WrestleMania match. That's not happening. It's not going to be at the Survivor Series. That's not happening. Could it be Royal Rumble? Very easily could be. That's a quality opponent that can draw in some unconventional fans who, Goldberg still has brand name recognition with some people. Maybe it's a Royal Rumble thing. Goldberg clearly would lose that. But Goldberg left with a bad taste in his mouth 2 years ago because Vince McMahon had promised him a retirement run or a retirement match, and he didn't get it. Perhaps that's what this could be. If not, perhaps he's signing a new deal with WWE. I mean, the guy's getting up there. I don't know how much longer he can do this, but he does look great. He is in great shape. Nobody can deny that, certainly for his age, but even against some of the people on the roster now, he looks amazing. So look, I get it. The Undertaker match in Saudi was god-awful and terrible. I understand that. The match with Bray Wyatt, he never should have won the match. I know why they did it. It was a bad idea, but that's not Bill Goldberg's fault. The reality is Goldberg has tried to do the best he could, and if you really pay attention to some of the matches, his last match when he came back in 2022, he had COVID. He was just recovering from COVID, could barely breathe, and then they got him to wrestle, and his match was not a premium match. Give the guy a chance to go out on his own terms. That's what we've done for all these legends, whether it's Ric Flair's last match, Sting's last match, Ricky Steamboat had his last match. Dory Funk Jr. just had his last match, over 80 years old. As a matter of fact, it's in the news today. If you're familiar with the United Kingdom legend Kendo Nagasaki, who is now, I want to say he's 82, 83 years old, 83. So his 83rd birthday, he's going to have a match. Return to the ring. And by the way, don't want to confuse this with Kendo Nagasaki, the guy who used to wrestle for NWA and World Class. This is the guy from the UK coming back to wrestle at 83. If these guys can do this and get fanfare for it, why can't Bill Goldberg, who looks freaking amazing, come back and get a little more respect than he does? He was never a catch-as-catch-can wrestler. He was never Mr. Technical Wrestler. He was a power wrestler, and at almost 60 years old, he could still go as a power wrestler. Take it. Realize what wrestling is. It's an attraction. He's an attraction. That's all he is. I don't love that he's always in the world championship picture myself. I actually loved his squashing of Dolph Ziggler a few years ago. No offense to Nick Nemeth, who hated that experience, but I think it was the right kind of thing for Bill Goldberg at that stage of his career. That's the kind of thing he could still be doing. Put Bill Goldberg out there with a Bronson Reed. Put him out there with somebody like Braun Strowman. Put him out there with some of the bigger guys who don't have a lot of other big guys to work with, just because he's an attraction. I love the idea of him and Gunther. You want to see hell freeze over. I'd love to see Bret Hart get involved somehow, since they just had that conversation a few weeks ago. I can't imagine that ever happening. But for the right amount of money, you know what they always say in wrestling, never say never. But we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. But I do think the introduction of the championship flawed, but the use of Goldberg might be a good thing. Other WWE news, the Four Horsemen, several members of the Four Horsemen at Bad Blood. We got to see Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, which is what's interesting to me about this is that Diamond Dallas Page signs a Legends contract coming out of Bad Blood. Arn Anderson was on the pay-per-view at SummerSlam supporting Cody Rhodes in the back. So you would think they would have offered him a Legends deal, and apparently he or Tully Blanchard, neither one has been offered one yet, where Diamond Dallas Page was. I would love to see them lock up Arn and Tully, and here's why. Arn has Brock coming along. His skills are getting significantly better. If you don't follow his matches on the independent scene or look him up on YouTube, he's getting much, much better in the ring. And which is what Arn Anderson said all along. You need to give these guys some reps so they can get good, and that's how they used to do it back in the day, and Brock needed that. And then when it comes to Tully, and I know this is a controversial take, but his daughter has been paying dues for a long time for a lot of really bad decisions she made. And one of the things, and I know recently Chelsea Green called Tessa Blanchard out for still not having apologized for the way she spoke and acted towards people in the past. I think that there has to be time for healing, especially in 2024, where there's always a reason to give somebody another chance. I think what having Tully on the roster and his connection to his daughter may give an opportunity for his daughter to put out that olive branch, have those conversations. And I get it. She can go on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it and put out retractions and apologies and all that kind of stuff. That's not the same thing as having her dad be under a Legends deal. She shows up to support her dad in his role. And while she's there, seeks out Chelsea Green and has a conversation, or any other female talent that she's ever said anything about that had a bad interaction, and tries to mend those fences, because she's an incredible female wrestler that could really inject some life into WWE's women's division, but she's not going to be able to do that for forever, and it would be great to see her. I do love the fact that this week we got several of the WWE divas trying to, or I shouldn't call them divas, the women's wrestlers, an old school term. I don't mean to be misogynistic using the term diva, but Chelsea Green is fresh on the mind and she wants to bring that term back. But the lady wrestlers, several of them, giving her a hard time, giving AJ Lee a hard time about coming back in wrestling. Liv Morgan asked about who one of her dream opponents would be for SummerSlam, and she mentioned that her and Dom against CM Punk and AJ Lee would be her dream match. I think that would be awesome. I'm okay with that. I don't know if AJ Lee's coming back. I just don't know. I know we've seen training videos. She could probably still go, but she did have some physical limitations, and I know that that's probably a big concern. The last tidbit of WWE news for today, Janelle Grant, her lawsuit against Vince McMahon and WWE and John Laurinaitis and anybody else involved apparently, her lawyer asked for WWE to waive the non-disclosure agreements so that other people who may have had a claim against Vince McMahon can come forward and be a part of the lawsuit. It's an interesting proposition, because if the NDAs were written as artifacts that are controlled by WWE, then that would be something they could do. And really, if you're thinking about it, that would earn them a lot of public positivity in a situation that right now is very dark. If they were signed as an agreement between the party and Vince McMahon, WWE would not have the power to do that. The complication is, I don't think her lawyer knows which party it's privy to. So perhaps WWE does the smart PR move and says, we're willing to do that. And then leave, especially if they aren't under WWE's umbrella, it would be very easy to say that if it's a Vince McMahon thing. If it is a WWE thing, doesn't that seem like the right thing to do? Get rid of the non-disclosure agreements and let these people tell their story if this guy really is an atrocious monster like some people want to make him out to be. He's putting together a whole documentary of his own now to try to counter the one that came out from Netflix. This is something where it's going to be like Brett and Sean arguing over whose fault the screw job is for years and years and years, and we don't need that. We need to get past this and start letting people heal. I think that's the important part. But we'll have to wait and see how that plays out in court. Last tidbit for today, Swerve Strickland finalized his AEW contract, one of the richest contracts in professional wrestling. They have not disclosed the exact amounts, but the phrase that was used was history has been made with Swerve Strickland's contract. This is bittersweet for me. I love that he got paid because he was the attraction in the company for most of the year, and I think he's earned a payday. My concern is when WWE looks at Swerve Strickland, or they look at Will Ospreay, or they look at Ricochet, or they look at Kazuchika Okada, and they were not willing to pay the money that AEW was willing to pay. Other talents will then look at AEW as, hey, that's the kind of money I can make, which then raises the pay expectation by everybody. And here's what happens, and this is what I think AEW signees are not thinking of. Great, you'll sign with Tony Khan for now and get this big payday. But what happens when everybody starts expecting that? Here's what WWE is going to do because they have a performance center. They'll keep making new stars. WWE is a machine. They're never going to pay what Tony Khan's paying because Tony's trying to stay in the game. Attendance numbers are down. Viewership is down. 690,000 people viewing in the 5-year anniversary of Dynamite is not enough to sustain a company, certainly not after a massive new deal with Warner Brothers Discovery that was just announced a couple weeks ago. They need to be drawing more people. And I get it, signing more talents and bringing in more high-profile names, maybe that does that, some of that, but it doesn't do enough. And so if you keep paying that level of contract to people, you are not as profitable as you need to be sustainable over the longer period of time. And what will happen is WWE will just keep churning out talent. because they are a juggernaut who can afford to take a chance on a ton of talents and find 1 or 2 or 3 diamonds in the rough every year, whereas AEW would then become reliant on the indie scene, WWE cast-offs, and overseas talent that nobody knows to be their stars of the future. And they're not creating as many of their own homegrown talents anymore as they did when they first started, which was one of the best things about AEW. It seems like in the last couple of years, I mean, you could go down the litany of names that were ex-WWE guys who are now focal points of AEW's programming, and it's almost everybody. Even Swerve is an ex-WWE guy, you know? So you got the Bucks, Hangman Page, Kenny Omega, people like that aren't, but Jon Moxley is, Daniel Bryan is. You know, the biggest stars in the company are WWE former employees. So what you're saying is you can't create your own talent anymore, so you're going to keep grabbing WWE guys and paying way too much money. And it's going to shift the market value. WWE is going to be like, fine, we'll just keep growing people. You can keep paying people. You'll be less profitable. We'll still be making a killing. You know what I mean? It's not a great business model. So I'm a little concerned about how that's going to play out over time. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us in our next episode for the latest wrestling news and rumors. Special thanks as always goes out to bensound.com, purpleplanet.com for producing any music or sound effects used in our show. That's actually kind of a nonsense. The closing sound is still bensound.com, purpleplanet.com. The intro music is our own, so I'm proud of that. Today's podcast sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bring a new friend to family game night. It's easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side of this game from Beazle Games by going to thegamecrafter.com and pick up your copy today. If you're looking for your next career move, maybe you're considering college or university life, or maybe you just need some formal training for your next career decision, go to our sister website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs, as Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Dr. Fro. I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us tonight. Until next time, take care, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.